1637 year, the Netherlands. A cold February day in the city of Haarlem. At an auction, dozens of traders have gathered. The lots are tulip bulbs, not flowers, not seeds. Bulbs. The auctioneer shouts out prices. 1,000 guilders, 2,000. 3,000. Silence. No one raises a hand. The auctioneer repeats. 2,500 guilders for the bulb of a single flower. Silence again. For the first time in 3 years, nobody wants to buy. At that moment, in that silence, the first financial bubble in the history of humanity burst. And by March of the year, 1,637 tulip bulbs that a month earlier had been worth as much as a house were worth nothing at all. How did this happen? Let us start from the beginning. The years from 1,600 to 1,700 were the golden age of the Netherlands. The Netherlands had just gained independence from Spain. Amsterdam became one of the richest cities in Europe. The Dutch East India Company, abbreviated as VOC, was the largest trading empire in the world. Ships sailed to India, Indonesia, Japan, bringing back spices, silk, and porcelain. The Dutch were the richest people in the world in terms of income per capita. From the year 1,600 to the year 1,720, higher than in any other country. There was money. What to do with it? Buy status items, art, exotic goods, rarities, paintings by Rembrandt, Chinese porcelain, Venetian glass, Persian carpets, and tulips. The tulip was not a European flower. It came from the Ottoman Empire, modern-day Turkey. In the middle of the 1500s, Ogier de Busbecq, ambassador of the Holy Roman Emperor to the court of the Sultan, sent the first bulbs to Europe. By the year 1610, tulips in the Netherlands were a symbol of wealth. Why? First, exoticism. Nothing like them had been seen in Europe. Bright colors, red, yellow, purple, unusual petal shapes. Second, rarity. From seed to flower took 7 to 12 years. That was a long time. A bulb bloomed faster, 1 to 3 years, but it still had to be grown or bought. Third, the most important thing, broken tulips. Sometimes tulips mutated and stripes, spots, flames appeared on the petals, white with red, yellow with purple. These broken tulips were incredibly beautiful and incredibly rare. Nobody knew why they appeared. Only in the 20th century did scientists discover that it was a virus, the tulip breaking virus. It weakened the bulb, made it even rarer, but created stunning patterns. The most famous tulip of all time was Semper Augustus, white with red flame like stripes, perfect shape. Only a few bulbs existed in the world. By the year 1610, one bulb of a rare tulip equaled a dowry for a bride, several thousand guilders. A prosperous brewery in France was exchanged for one bulb of the Tulip Brasserie variety. The wealthy grew tulips in their gardens. This was cooler than paintings, living art. But tulips were fragile. They bloomed 1 to 2 weeks a year. Bulbs had to be stored properly. And most importantly, there were few of them. Demand grew. Wealthy Dutchmen, German princes, French aristocrats wanted tulips. Prices began to rise. Until the year 1633, the tulip trade was professional. Buyers and sellers were gardeners who grew them, flower traders who resold them, and wealthy collectors who bought them for their gardens. Prices were high, but reasonable. A rare tulip cost 100 to 500 guilders. That was a lot. The annual income of a skilled craftsman was about 250 to 300 guilders, but it was not madness. Deals were simple. The buyer came to the seller, inspected the bulb or the flower when it bloomed, paid the money, and took the bulb. Everything was honest. Everything was transparent. But in the years 1633 to 1634, everything changed. What happened? First, ordinary people saw money. Gardeners sold bulbs for 500 guilders, a year later for 1,000, 2 years later for 2,000, a profit of 300 to 400% per year. Craftsmen, merchants, even tavern keepers thought, I want this too. Second, futures contracts appeared. The problem was that bulbs were in the ground from June to September. They could not be dug up and sold in summer. The solution was to sell contracts for future delivery of bulbs. The scheme worked as follows. In February of the year 1636, I sell you a contract for delivery of an Admiral demand bulb in June of the year 1636 for 500 guilders. In April, you resell this contract to someone else for 800 guilders, a profit of 300. In May, that person sells it to a third for 1,200, a profit of 400. In June, the third receives the bulb. The bulb does not move anywhere. It is in the ground. People trade papers. Third, leverage. People borrowed money to buy contracts. They mortgaged houses, land, businesses. The logic was, I buy for 1,000 on credit, sell for 2,000 in a month, repay the debt, and earn 1,000. This is called leverage. It amplifies profits, but losses as well. Fourth, ordinary trade stopped. A quote from documents of the year 1636 stated that ordinary industry in the country was abandoned. The population, even down to the lowest classes, engaged in the trade in tulips. Weavers abandoned looms. Carpenters abandoned tools. Tavern keepers traded contracts in their taverns. In Amsterdam, special exchanges opened for trading tulips, like a stock exchange, but for bulbs. By December of the year 1636 and January of the year 1637, the madness reached its peak. Real prices from documents show that Admiral van der Eyck sold for 1,045 guilders on the 5th of February of the year 1637. Admiral de Man sold for 3,000 guilders. Semper Augustus, the most expensive, sold for 5,000 to 6,000 guilders. For comparison, with that money at prices of the years 1636 to 1637, one could buy a good house in Amsterdam for 5,000 guilders. 21 acres of land were offered for one Semper Augustus, according to some sources. The annual income of a skilled master was 250 to 300 guilders. 8 pigs cost 240 guilders, 4 oxen cost 480 guilders, a ton of butter cost 100 guilders, 1,000 pounds of cheese cost 120 guilders, and a bed cost 100 guilders. One Semper Augustus tulip equaled 20 annual salaries of a craftsman or a good house. By modern measures, this would be equivalent to 750,000 to 1 million United States dollars, written out in words for a single bulb. And this was not the limit. In January of the year 1637, contracts were resold 10 times a day. Prices rose every hour. One Dutch pamphlet of the year 1637 described a deal in which a man sold a bulb in the morning for 1,000 guilders. By lunch, it was sold for 1,500, and by evening for 2,200. Everyone thought the price would rise forever. Fashion for tulips would never end. Everyone wanted them. Wealthy people from all over Europe would pay any money. There were insane stories. One story described a sailor who came to a trader, saw a bulb on the table, thought it was an onion, took it, and ate it with herring. It was a Semper Augustus bulb worth 3,000 guilders, a price that could have fed the entire ship crew for a year. The trader put the sailor in prison for several months until he could pay compensation. Another story described an English botanist who, not knowing about the mania, cut open a bulb of Admiral van der Eyck worth 4,000 florins for scientific study. He was immediately arrested and held until he paid compensation. The auction in Haarlem took place on the 3rd of February of the year 1637. The city of Haarlem was the center of the tulip trade. The main auctions were held there, the 3rd of February of the year 1637. An ordinary auction. Contracts for tulip bulbs with delivery in May to June were put up for sale. The auctioneer began the bidding. The first lot was Admiral de Man. The starting price was 1,250 guilders. Silence. The auctioneer lowered the price to 1,000 guilders. Silence. 800 guilders. Nobody raised a hand. For the first time in 3 years, nobody wanted to buy. Why did this happen? Nobody knows for certain. But there are several versions. Version 1. Fear of the plague. In the year 1636, there was a plague epidemic in the Netherlands. By February of the year 1637, it had subsided, but it is possible that buyers feared the epidemic would return and did not come. Version 2. Understanding matured. People suddenly realized that a bulb is just a bulb. It does not generate income. It does not produce anything. Its value exists only because someone else is willing to pay more for it. A Ponzi scheme, a financial pyramid, a game of hot potato. While the music plays, you pass it on. When it stops, the loser is the one holding it. Version 3. Overproduction. By the winter of the years 1636 to 1637, gardeners were planting tulips en masse. Everyone saw the money. Buyers thought that soon there would be too many bulbs and prices would fall, and they stopped buying, waiting for the decline. A self-fulfilling prophecy. Everyone expects a fall. Nobody buys. Prices fall. The domino effect unfolded from the 4th to the 7th of February. News about the Haarlem auction spread across the country within hours. In Haarlem, nobody's buying. Panic. On the 4th of February, auctions in Amsterdam showed the same result. No buyers. On the 5th of February, Rotterdam, Utrecht, and Leiden followed. Panic everywhere. Everyone tried to sell at the same time, but nobody wanted to buy. The law of supply and demand applied. There was enormous supply because everyone was selling. There was zero demand because nobody was buying. The result was that the price fell toward zero. Within 1 week, admiral demand fell from 3,000 guilders on the 1st of February to 50 guilders on the 10th of February, a loss of 98%. Gouda fell from 800 guilders to 20 guilders, a loss of 97.5%. Common varieties fell from 200 guilders to 2 to 5 guilders, a loss of 97 to 99%. Even the legendary Semper Augustus fell from 5,000 to 6,000 guilders to approximately 50 to 100 guilders by the end of February. The annualized speed of the collapse was 99.999%. For comparison, during ordinary financial crises, assets fall by 30 to 50%. Tulips fell by 99%. Who suffered? The classic story, described by Charles Mackay in the year 1841, claimed that many drowned in canals from despair, that the rich turned into beggars, that noble families were ruined forever. The reality was different. Historian Anne Goldgar spent years studying archives, including court records, wills, notarial acts, and bankruptcy documents. Her conclusions were as follows. First, there were few traders. Goldgar found around 350 people involved in the tulip trade, possibly a little more, but certainly not thousands. It was not the whole country. It was a small group. Second, the buyers were wealthy people. 37 people paid more than 300 guilders for a bulb, which equaled the annual salary of a craftsman. They were successful merchants and artisans, not peasants or servants. They could afford to lose money. Third, there were no bankruptcies caused specifically by tulips. Goldgar did not find a single documented case of bankruptcy caused specifically by Tulip Mania. There were bankruptcies for other reasons, such as real estate, debt, or failed businesses, but not tulips. Fourth, contracts were not fulfilled. This was the key point. All contracts were for future delivery. The bulbs were in the ground. Money was supposed to change hands in May or June upon delivery. The collapse happened in February. The bulbs were still in the ground. Nobody paid. And the Dutch government intervened and declared that any contract could be cancelled by paying 10% of the price. For example, you signed a contract to buy a bulb for 2,000 guilders in June. In February, the price collapsed to 50 guilders. You pay 200 guilders, which is 10% of 2,000, and the contract is cancelled. Most people did exactly this. Fifth, who really suffered? The gardeners, the growers. They had real bulbs in the ground. They had invested time, labor, and land. Prices collapsed. Their product was worth 1/100th of what they had expected. But even they were not completely ruined. The bulbs were still worth something, just much less. Court cases created chaos in the spring of the year 1637. Although contracts could be canceled for 10%, many refused to pay even that. In the spring and summer of the year 1637, there were hundreds of lawsuits. A typical case involved a seller saying that you signed a contract for 1,500 guilders and must pay, while the buyer replied that the bulb now cost 20 guilders and refused to pay 1,500. The courts were overwhelmed. Most cases dragged on for months. In the end, most were settled for smaller sums or simply forgotten. The reaction of the government followed. The Dutch government and municipalities introduced the 10% rule described above. They declared many contracts invalid as gambling contracts that had no legal force. They banned futures trading in tulips on official exchanges. They attempted to stabilize the market, but unsuccessfully. By the end of the year 1637, the tulip market returned to professionals. Prices were low and stable. The mania was over. The economic effect on the Netherlands was minimal. The classic myth claims that Tulip Mania destroyed the Dutch economy. The reality was that it had almost no effect at the macro level. The reasons were clear. The number of participants was small, a few hundred, at most 1,000 people. Real money was not lost because contracts were cancelled. The Dutch economy was enormous, with the Dutch East India Company, global trade, shipbuilding, fishing, and textile production. Tulips were a tiny part of it. The number of bankruptcies in Amsterdam averaged around 50 per year in the years 1635 to 1636 before the crash. In the years 1637 to 1638 after the crash, the number rose to around 100. This was a doubling, but not because of tulips. It was due to the general economic cycle. The golden age of the Netherlands continued for another 50 to 80 years. Why this matters. Tulip Mania in the year 1637 was the first documented financial bubble in history. All elements of a classic bubble were present. There was a new asset, tulips, exotic and rare. Prices were rising, bringing profits of 300 to 1,000% per year. There was fear of missing out, expressed as everyone is getting rich and I am not. There was leverage, as people borrowed money in order to buy more. There was the idea that this time is different, that prices will rise forever, and this is not a bubble. There was the greater fool principle, where you buy it not because the asset has value, but because someone else will buy it from you at a higher price. There was a sudden collapse with panic, everyone selling, and prices collapsing within days. There was denial and blame, with claims that it was not my fault, that the government was to blame, that speculators were to blame. This pattern has repeated hundreds of times over 400 years. The South Sea Bubble in the year 1720 involved shares of the South Sea Company in England. The Mississippi Bubble in the year 1720 involved shares of the Mississippi Company in France. Railway Mania in the 1840s involved shares of railway companies. The crash of the year 1929 involved the United States stock market. The dot-com bubble in the year 2000 involved internet companies. The mortgage crisis of the year 2008 involved real estate and derivatives. The initial coin offering bubble of the year 2017 involved cryptocurrencies. Meme stocks in the year 2021 involved companies such as GameStop and AMC. The non-fungible token bubble of the years 2021 to 2022 involved digital tokens. Each time people say that this time is different. Each time it is the same. Myths versus reality. Over 400 years, the history of Tulip Mania became surrounded by myths. Let us examine what is true and what is not. Myth 1. All of the Netherlands traded tulips. Reality. Several hundred people, mainly wealthy merchants and artisans. Not peasants, not servants, not every chimney sweep. Myth 2. All bulbs cost as much as houses. Reality. Only the rarest ones. 37 people paid more than 300 guilders, which equaled an annual salary. Most transactions were 50 to 200 guilders. Expensive, but not madness. Myth 3. Thousands were ruined and drowned in canals from despair. Reality. Not a single documented bankruptcy caused by tulips. Not a single suicide. This was an invention of the writer Charles Mackay in the year 1841, who relied on satirical pamphlets from the year 1637. The Dutch enjoyed mocking fools. Myth 4. The Dutch economy collapsed. Reality. Almost no effect. The Golden Age continued. The Dutch East India Company prospered. Trade grew. Myth 5. This was the biggest bubble in history. Reality. By scale, one of the smallest. But the first documented one. That is why it is famous. Why the myths persist. Charles Mackay was a Scottish journalist. In the year 1841, he published the book Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Mackay took satirical pamphlets from the year 1637, which deliberately exaggerated events for comic effect, and presented them as facts. His book became a bestseller. It was reprinted more than 100 times. All financial textbooks cite it. The problem is that Mackay did not verify archives. He retold satire. Only in the years 1999 to 2007 did the historian Anne Goldgar and the economist Peter Garber seriously study documents and show that reality was far more modest. But myth is more beautiful than reality. That is why the myth lives, the real lessons of Tulip Mania. Lesson 1. Price is not equal to value. A tulip bulb does not generate income. It does not pay dividends. It does not provide rent. It does not create goods. Its value exists only because someone else will pay for it. This is called the greater fool theory. You buy not because the asset is valuable, but because there will be a fool who will buy it from you at a higher price. It works as long as fools exist. When they run out, there is a collapse. Lesson 2. Leverage kills. If you buy with your own money and the price falls, you lose your money. That is bad, but not a catastrophe. If you buy with borrowed money and the price falls, you lose your money and still owe the bank. That is bankruptcy. Most participants in Tulip Mania avoided catastrophe because contracts were canceled. If contracts had been executed, there would have been mass bankruptcies. Lesson 3. Bubbles are inevitable. For as long as there are people, there will be bubbles. Human psychology includes greed, fear of missing out, and herd behavior. Everyone buys, prices rise, more people buy, prices rise more, a bubble forms. Then panic follows, everyone sells, and a collapse occurs. It is impossible to predict when a bubble will burst. Only afterward do people say that it was obvious. Lesson 4. This time is different is the most dangerous phrase. Every bubble is accompanied by this phrase. In the year 1637 people said that tulips were not ordinary goods, that this was art. In the year 1720 people said that the South Sea Company was a genius of trade. In the year 1929 people said that they were in a new era of permanent prosperity. In the year 2000 people said that the internet changes everything and old rules do not work. In the year 2008 people said that real estate prices always rise. In the year 2017 people said that cryptocurrency is the future of money. In the year 2021 people said that non-fungible tokens are a revolution in art. Each time there was a collapse. Basic economic laws do not disappear. In the long term, price must correspond to value. Modern parallels: Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Critics often compare Bitcoin to tulips. It does not produce income. Its value exists only because someone will buy it at a higher price. It shows wild price swings from $1,000 to $69,000 and back to $15,000. There is fear of missing out and greed. Defenders respond that Bitcoin is a technology based on blockchain, that it has limited supply of 21 million coins, that it is decentralized, and that it protects against inflation. Who is right? Time will tell. Non-fungible tokens in the years 2021 to 2022. An even closer parallel. Digital images were sold for millions of dollars. Some images from the Bored Ape Yacht Club sold for more than $500,000. People said that this was art, status, and the future. In the years 2022 to 2023, the market collapsed, and many non-fungible tokens became worth $0. This was an exact copy of Tulip Mania. Even the time frame was similar, 2 to 3 years. Meme stocks such as GameStop and AMC. In the year 2021, traders from online forums bought shares of GameStop. The price jumped from $20 to $483 in 1 week. People said that they would defeat hedge funds. 1 month later, the price returned to around $40. Fear of missing out, herd behavior, collapse. What an investor should do. First, distinguish between price and value. Ask the question what this asset produces. A company share produces dividends and profit. Real estate produces rent. A bond produces interest. Gold produces nothing, but it is a physical asset with limited supply and 5,000 years of history. A tulip bulb produces nothing. If it produces nothing and its value exists only in resale, be cautious. Second, avoid leverage in speculative assets. Leverage amplifies both profits and losses. In a speculative asset, where the price can fall by 50 to 90% quickly, leverage is a path to bankruptcy. Third, do not blindly follow the crowd. If everyone says you must buy, it may already be too late. Bubbles burst when the last fool has already bought and there is nobody left to sell to. Fourth, diversification. Do not put all eggs in one basket. If 100% of capital is in tulips, or Bitcoin, or non-fungible tokens, or a single stock, one event will destroy you. Fifth, study history. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes, as Mark Twain said. Bubbles have happened hundreds of times. Learn from past mistakes. Final thought. Tulip Mania in the year 1637 is not just a story about flowers. It is a story about human nature, about greed, about fear of missing out, about belief that this time is different, about herd instinct. 400 years have passed. Nothing has changed. Are we smarter than the Dutch of the year 1637? No, we have more data, better technology, and more complex financial instruments. But psychology is the same. Each generation thinks that it will not repeat the mistakes of the past. Each generation repeats them. The dot-com bubble in the year 2000, real estate in the year 2008, cryptocurrencies in the year 2017, non-fungible tokens in the year 2021. And there will be new bubbles. We do not know which ones, but they will exist. Because people do not change. The question is not whether the next bubble will happen. The question is whether you will participate in it. And if you do, make sure that you're not the one holding the bag when the music stops. Because in the game of hot potato, someone always ends up with burned hands. 400 years ago, it was Dutch gardeners holding tulip bulbs worth 2% of their former price. Tomorrow, it could be anyone, possibly you. Remember the tulips.